Welcome to Farming for Health, where Farmer Lee Jones and I talk with leaders in food, farming, and health and wellness to spread knowledge and inspire a plant-forward future, starting now. Welcome to the Farming for Health podcast. I'm Dr. Amy Sapola, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Amy Ippoliti. She's an author, yoga teacher, and soil advocate. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much. How fun to be on a podcast with another Amy.
Yes, it's the day of Amy's. So first I wanted to just start off by learning about you and how you got into yoga.
Well, yoga was something that came to me in my teens. So I was 16 years old and I had been babysitting my little brother. And when I sat down after putting him in bed, I looked up at my dad's bookshelf and my body just kind of stood up and I went and grabbed the Tao Te Ching off the shelf. And when I opened up to verse 20 and realized that it was the lyrics to a pop song of my favorite pop artist, that he had clearly read the Tao Te Ching and extracted lyrics from the very verse that I opened the page to. And that just blew my mind to such an extent that I read that book cover to cover with my sister, trying to understand it. And it really sort of put me on the path of spirituality. And what I mean by that is it got me asking the larger questions about life, like, who are you and what really matters and what's important and why are we here? And that seemed much more interesting to me than the mean girls at school and the popularity contests. And so I started yoga by going with my mom. She invited me. She was like, "Do you want to go to this yoga class?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And for me, the yoga was so much about, the bigger questions or the mystery of life. It wasn't physical for me really at all, although that was nice. It was all about asking those larger questions, like what really matters while we're here. And that's how I got started. I was 16. Yeah.
Wow. And then how did you begin teaching?
So about 11 years into taking yoga, I had found a really amazing teacher named Cindy Lee in New York City. And she said she was running a teacher training. And I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And the whole notion of a lifestyle of being a yoga teacher seemed like this total pipe dream for me. I was in my 20s and I was too afraid to ask, for the application to be part of the training. I just didn't think I was worthy. I didn't think I was old enough, all those things. I was 26. And finally, it was getting down to the wire, the damn training was going to start. I had to bite the bullet. And so I physically made myself go up to her and ask for the application. And I expected this huge rejection and instead was met with, "Oh, yay, that's great." And she gave me the application and I applied and I took the training. And on the very first night, I said, "Listen, Cindy, that was great. Just want you to know I'm only here to deepen my practice. I don't want to be a teacher. I just want to deepen my understanding of yoga." And she just said, "Shut up. You're going to teach yoga." And it was
awesome.
that belief in me, or that belief she had that I could
Yeah.
teach, was enough to kind of light a little spark in my heart that said, maybe you could do this. Maybe you are worthy. And then I, kind of went with it and it was all over after that. I became a teacher,
Oh my
clearly.
gosh. Isn't it amazing how somebody can have such an influence
Yeah.
and
I
their belief in simple words can really change the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, and that we can do that for others is pretty big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so, how did you become interested in the soil connection? I know you're a soil advocate. So, when did you become interested in that connection between the soil and the earth and our bodies?
Well, I've always been an earth advocate. I've always had a very, very deep, deep connection with nature. I grew up going to a summer camp in Vermont where we were going into the wilderness. I was planning, wilderness canoe trips and hikes up into the presidential mountain range. And so, very, very deep connection to nature. And so, I think one, if you feel connected to nature, you can't help but get kind of lit up by soil health and the microbiology of the soil and the little critters that are all inside the soil. But for me, the yoga soil connection happened through a very good friend of mine who at first was a student coming to my yoga class at Yoga Journal. So I used to teach the team at Yoga Journal magazine. And the publisher at the time was a man named Jeff Patch, who is now the chief impact officer for the Rodale Institute. And so he would come to my yoga class. And one day I didn't see him in the office. And I was like, where'd Jeff go? It's just like he was gone. Found out he was no longer working with the magazine. I kind of lost touch. He texted me one day and he said, I've moved to Pennsylvania to the Rodale Institute, or not to the Institute, but I'm now working at the Institute as the chief impact officer. Or maybe he was something else before that. He was in the publishing part of it. And he was like, you need to come to the farm. And I was like, I do? Okay. I love farms. Sounds great. Let's do it. And I think I did some magazine stuff for Organic Living at the time, which was part of the Rodale Press before they sold the press. And he gave me a tour of the farm and explained to me how healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people, how the idea of regenerative organic agriculture could be a solution to climate change and the climate crisis through the sequestration of carbon in the soil through these regenerative practices. And I just was like, okay, whatever I need to do to help you, to get behind this cause, to start regenerating the land behind my house, like whatever I need to do, I'm in. This is phenomenal. Because I would say back in the 90s, right when I was graduating from college, is when I heard about climate change for the first time. I was in Costa Rica. I was visiting the Phoenix family, so River and Joaquin Phoenix, their family. I was good pals with them through the environmental movement and the animal rights movement back in the day. And they went down to, River had gone down to there was a big environmental conference in Rio. I'm forgetting the name of it. It was like the big summit in Rio, maybe 92. And they came back and they met us in Costa Rica and they said, there's this thing called climate change that's happening. The scientists have predicted it. It's bad. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to leave the United States. I'm just going to go to Costa Rica and live in the rainforest. I can't take this. And River's mother, Hart, said to me, she goes, no, 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 stay in the United States. That's where you're needed the most. And so that stuck with me, just this idea that I'm needed in this movement toward keeping the planet at a habitable temperature. And so I've always stayed and been as much of an activist as I could. It ended up that I started out in yoga, but I felt like as a leader in yoga or a teacher that I could be an influence to others. So I've always woven the idea of respect for the earth, of stewardship of the earth, into my yoga teachings, being a regenerative consumer into my yoga teachings. And so that's really kind of to circle way back to your question, why it was so appealing to me to hear that regenerative farming could be a solution toward this really huge issue and place that we find ourselves. Like, how do we create a livable future on Earth? And nothing seems more important than that. And so,
oh, I couldn't agree more. And what an amazing journey. I
Yeah, it's pretty
would love
wild.
to hear. Do you have some examples of like how you would incorporate that into your class, or like what are some things that you have found help people really like get it during practicing yoga? A message from our sponsor. Farmer Jones Farm provides nutritious, regeneratively grown vegetables to home cooks nationwide. We seek to provide our community with vegetables grown in a way that's healthy for you and good for the planet. To learn more about Farmer Jones Farm, visit farmerjonesfarm.com.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about yoga and the yoga poses, there's so many poses that are named after animals or after plants, like tree pose and mountain pose. And there's so much reference to the earth in yoga and to nature and our connection to nature. There's so many teachings around union and connection and interconnection in yoga. And so it's pretty natural for a yoga teacher to be able to bring in something like, the diversity of biology in the soil and how nerdy and amazing that is, how our microbiome inside is directly connected to the microbiome of the soil outside. That we're separated from the earth through a one cell thick membrane, in your, like, from your mouth to your anus. It's just that tiny permeable boundary between the outside world and the inside world. And so yoga talks about the microcosm and the macrocosm all the time. So for me, it's really fun to think of new ways to bring nature into yoga class, and even soil health into yoga class. There's ways of bringing in. I have classes themed around keystone species. Like why keystone species are so important to an ecosystem and how that relates to our own ecosystems inside. And you could go on and on.
Wow. And so people who want to get started like as an earth advocate, like where do they start? What's the first step or few steps that you would recommend somebody does?
Well, I think thinking about how we consume. So we're all like, one of the things in yoga that can happen is people feel guilty about being a consumer. Like I should be, not harming anything in the planet and I just shouldn't buy anything, and we get like really extreme. But what it's about is just respecting reciprocity. So if I take something from the earth, can I give something back? Can I be a better steward? Could I plant a garden? Could I compost? Could I do something to give back? When I'm harvesting a plant, can I leave a part of it behind so that it's sure to continue to grow and multiply rather than taking the whole thing? Like looking at our own sort of greediness, if you will, versus a respect for nature. So I think about like, how do we consume? It's not if we're going to consume, it's how are we going to consume? And so that's one way. Another is simply to find your connection to Mother Earth, and that means getting outside, getting in nature, going into the wilderness if you can. But regenerative consumerism to me is the most exciting part, because we can start looking into how do we support local farms in our area, because the food that's healthiest for us is the food that's grown closest to us, is usually the case, as you know. We can look at, sourcing. We can look at, like how we process food scraps and food waste. And, are we buying plastic contained foods rather than fresh whole foods that don't need plastic? And so we could get into that like maybe more if you want, but that's really the gist, is the regenerative consumerism. I would say the third piece is, um, getting involved on a local level in politics. And I know politics is like a dirty word, especially in yoga. People don't really like it, but, policy change and politics are how we care for one another. And if we can care for one another, then those cared for people can care for the planet. A lot of folks don't care for the planet if they are not cared for. So politics is how we care for one another, and therefore who we elect to represent us really does matter. And we can start on a local level. Who's on the school board? Who's the city council person? Who is our local congressperson? Who's our state senator, all the way up to, to president, right? But I think that we can't change policy or move the needle on policy in a really profound structural way if we don't have representatives who feel the same way as we do about the earth and about soil and about farming practices and all these things. So I think, like, on a large scale, we need to really be involved in civics and our civic duty and voting. And then on a more individual scale, we can get into nature so that we appreciate it, and we can get into, like, how do we consume in a way that's less destructive.
I love that. And I think that's such an important approach to think about not only your little microcosm, but kind of the macrocosm of how is your decision or your vote or whatever, like what's the ripple effect of that? Um,
Yeah.
so when we talk about nourishment, and I know you were talking about like the food that you buy, how does nourishment and the food we consume relate to yoga?
Well, yoga is nourishment for our bodies, right? So, like, when you start to practice yoga, I found this for myself. I became more sensitive, sort of more sensitive to what I put on my body, what I put in my body. I was just more tuned in, more present. And when you don't feel well, you're sensitive to that as well. So yoga, I think a lot of us become kind of numb to the bad way that we feel. It's like we don't even know that we feel like crap
Yeah.
until we're really sick. So yoga, like, tunes you in such a way that you can feel it when you're off, or like you didn't have a good poop in the morning, or like any little thing is off, you feel it because your sensitivity is so much more present. And so if you don't eat well, there's a certain alchemy to that. Like, you don't eat well, you feel like crap, you go to your yoga mat and you're like aware of it. Like, oh God, that maybe wasn't something that I should eat. And so there's kind of an inspiration to get into healthy food or healthy products that you put on your skin, and the way you choose, what's under your sink in terms of what you clean your house with. And one of my favorite things about traveling to teach is that I often will stay in someone's home. Someone will be lovely enough to put me up, and it's usually a yogi in the community. But what I love is, like, I get there and they've got organic food in their refrigerator. They have seventh generation biodegradable cleaning products under their sink. They have, all the natural biodegradable skincare and body care products in the shower. And I can kind of go, oh, and like the towels don't smell like commercial perfume laundry soap, right? Like, there's a consciousness that happens. And so when we talk about nourishment and food, it's the same thing. They're like, oh, would you like some kale? Would you like some organic this? And, it's like, wow, it's very rare that I go into a yogi's home and there's, processed foods and commercially grown stuff in the refrigerator. And I know it's expensive to buy that way, but it's a matter of, like, that's what they're prioritizing. And let's also be clear that people that do yoga tend to be successful enough that they can figure out how to put food on the table, and also successful enough to buy organic produce. So, um, I don't want to say that, like, oh, all yogis are so special because they buy organic produce and blah blah blah. It's not easy to do that, but they prioritize it. They may have sacrificed something else in their budget to pay for organic food. So I recognize being a yogi is a very privileged place to be as well. But that said, when I travel, there's just a link to that, you know, that healthy desire to be nourished that I see.
I
So there's
love
a
that.
connection.
Yeah, that's, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that there's something to be said for when you are able to get in tune with your body and listen to the feedback of your body, you also are more in tune with like the energy of nature and the food and the vibrancy of the things that you put into your body. And how that affects you and kind of the people around you and the earth and everything as well. Um, I love your example of the other yogis too, because I feel like that when I go to my friends' houses, and you're like, oh, you get me, like
Yeah, you're my people.
you're my people.
Yeah.
It's yeah, absolutely.
Well, and
It's
also like, you and I were really lucky this fall to be part of the regenerative healthcare conference at Rodale Institute. That's one way that we met. But I don't know about you, but I felt when I was eating the organic food, it was also chef prepared, which didn't hurt.
yeah,
But just eating that way and such a diversity of plant forward foods and different, yeah, just different kinds of foods, that diversity of eating and the beauty in which it was prepared, and then the company that we were keeping while eating it
hmm,
just felt really different even than my home cooked meals. Like it's just incredible when you eat right from the soil, right from the farm, and you're in good company. You're breaking bread with others. There's just nothing like it. That's why I love yoga retreats too. But
yeah. I
this
think
felt
that's like the
so
beauty of
good.
kind of mindful eating. Like that was mindful eating in practice, right?
Yeah,
Because the food is so beautiful and vibrant that you can't help but be present. You don't necessarily want to be doing anything else other than engaging with the people that are there and the food that's in front of you. And, you're excited to taste, but all of your
yeah,
senses are really turned on.
yeah. I mean, I just wish that experience for everyone.
Hmm.
To sit around the table, screen free, breaking bread, eating someone's art,
Yeah.
not someone's art, the chef, and someone's art, the farmer. I mean, just you could feel every bit of what went into that food. And I
Hmm.
think that food is medicine, food is art vibe is just the best thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really it. That sits really different in your body than food that was prepared by someone who's mad or, that isn't prepared in a way that's kind of loving and nourishing in itself. And so,
Or seeing it as a product, not
yeah.
food. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I think that does all tie really well into just the practice of yoga and what it is to be non harming, too, when we think
Mhm.
about how we nourish ourselves.
Yeah. Well, yoga is artistry in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. I mean, we think of it as sometimes just a class that we go to, like we check off a box, like I did my yoga. But yoga can be practiced with great grace and beauty and expression. And then when we go off the mat, we take what we experienced in the practice, whether it's meditation, pranayama, or asana itself, but we take, kind of our experience from the mat and we decide how do I want to express that in the world, how in the myriad ways that we could. And so yoga is artistry, really.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So, you, speaking of artistry, have done vocals with quite a few different people, one being Krishna Das. How has singing really impacted your life and how has it impacted your health?
That's a great question. So, well, singing is just joyful. Certainly chanting the divine names is joyful. And I was very lucky to have a period in my life where I traveled with Krishna Das, you should look him up if you haven't heard of him, but incredible chanting music. And I also had the opportunity when I was young to study Sanskrit, which is like known as the language of the gods, but it does something because the ancients, when they were coming up with the language itself, they were sort of divinely channeling. And when you chant the different syllables and vowel sounds, it does something amazing to your throat. Physiologically, I can't explain it. The resonance, though, that is produced by the sounds, I am explaining it, uh, resonates in different parts of the body. And so your physiology can actually change by the kind of resonance and the location of the resonance in your body. And so I found that that resonance was really powerful in my throat in particular, but I just felt really uplifted and energized whenever I would chant Sanskrit. And to this day, that's the case. So that's why I use Sanskrit names in my yoga class, even though a lot of people are like, it's weird when yoga teachers use the Sanskrit names of poses. Like they shouldn't do that. And I'm just like, no, please do it.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Because there's a
interesting.
transmission.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think that, again, that resonance and the energy that
Mhm.
creates is really
It's
important.
it's vibration, which
Hmm.
is scintillating in everything in nature.
Yeah. Yeah. So, as someone with an international presence, what do you find most rewarding about your work?
Oh, well, one that I've seen the world. So I've um, been to a lot of different places. There's obviously still spots I haven't been to, but I feel very inspired by the experience of different cultures. But I also am lucky because, as I said, I've often had the chance to stay with a local person who's taking the workshop or whatever. But also, the folks that come to my workshops are all locals. So it's like most people, when they travel, they go to a hotel and they meet the staff at most. But I'm meeting like an entire community of people, local. So that has been such an incredible gift, to say I went to Dublin and now I feel like I have this huge family of Dubliners and other folks from Ireland, and I kind of get a chance to get to know that culture. Similarly, all over South America or Korea or Japan, it's just wild to be able to do that. And then they take you to all the local places, and so
Oh, that's
I've been really,
incredible.
I've been really blessed. So and even like I remember in going to like places like Malaysia and Singapore, and the students just they would hear that I was into, yummy natural food. And so they would come in with all the seasonal fruits, from the area. And I would just be like, how do you open this? Like this is how. And it's like all these tricky ways of opening it and eating it. So things like that. Yeah.
Oh, how
That's been so
fun. What's
mm-hmm.
one of your favorite things you've experienced, like tried, new, like exciting fruits or vegetables or things you've tried during your travels?
Oh, let's see. Gosh. I would have to say the durian fruit.
Ooh,
It's
tell
like
me more.
crazy. So it's this fruit that really smells bad. So like when you go past a table of it at a marketplace, you're just like, oh, gross, durian. And all the students were daring me to try it. Like, you have to try durian. I was like, but it smells so bad. And so finally the day came and we were in my student's kitchen in Malaysia with his mom and the whole thing. And they brought the durian in, they cut it open. It was revolting, the smell. And they were like, try it. You have to try it. And so I'm like, ugh. And I ate it and it was like delicious.
Really?
Yeah. And so, like, what happens is because you're consuming it, you're actually devouring it, you're eating it, you're becoming it, you don't smell it anymore, if that makes sense.
Oh
It's
my
kind of like when
gosh.
everyone eats garlic and has garlic breath, then no one
Yeah.
does. So it was like that. So I could just taste it for what it was. It didn't taste bad. And then it was so like pungent that the next day I could smell it on my body.
Oh.
Yeah. But I loved it. It was wonderful. It was a really great food. I love mangosteen is another beautiful food I had never eaten before, and rambutan, incredible fruits. And then
Yeah.
I developed an obsession with pomelos as well.
Ooh, what do you do with them? Do you have them just plain or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all about how you peel it, how you prepare it, taking the pith away, and then just the succulent fruit. It like pops in your mouth and like, oh, it's just,
Oh my gosh.
don't even get me started about pomelo. Yeah.
That sounds delicious. Makes me want a pomelo.
If we're ever together, we're getting one and I will make it for you.
Yes, that sounds so good. A note from our sponsor.
The Chef's Garden is a family-owned regenerative farm that grows the most flavorful and nutritious vegetables, herbs, and microgreens for culinary professionals and home cooks. For over 30 years, the Chef's Garden has supplied some of the world's finest chefs and restaurants. Now, through Farmer Jones Farm, the same delicious ingredients are available to home cooks in the United States to use and enjoy, delivered directly to their homes. The Chef's Garden mission is to grow exceptional vegetables, care for each other and the land, and inspire a vegetable-forward future. For more information, visit chefs-garden.com.
So, speaking of cooking, what is one of your favorite like vegetable forward meals that you prepare at home?
I am a huge fan. This is a pretty simple recipe. I'm a huge fan of sweet potatoes. And I
Mm.
particularly love the Japanese sweet potatoes that have the purple outside and the white flesh on the inside. But I also really like the Stokes purple sweet potatoes that are purple throughout.
Mm-hmm.
So either of those or a traditional sweet potato is fine. You're going to roast it at 420 for 15 minutes or bake it at 420 for 15 minutes. And then after 15 minutes, you're going to lower the heat down to 380 for 30 minutes. You're going to take it out, open it up. It's going to have this like crisp skin on the outside and like butter on the inside. You're going to, plump it up. And then you're going to throw on coconut yogurt,
Oh, yum.
um, chopped nuts, whatever you want. Walnuts is probably a good one. Pecans would be really amazing, or macadamia, or even peely nuts would be cool. And then a little salt, tons of cinnamon. And this is hard to get, but like I have this apple cinnamon sauerkraut that I
Ooh.
put on top sometimes. Hard to find, but you could do like anything apple-y would be really yummy, like chopped green Granny Smith apple on top, ton of cinnamon, and then just get down.
Oh, that sounds awesome. That's so
So
different.
good. It's so good. It's my favorite dessert.
I love it. And it's so good for like your digestive health
Oh,
too.
the best. All you get probiotics, prebiotics, postbiotics, you get it all.
Yeah. And with the
Yeah.
purple potatoes, the
Oh
anthocyanins,
yeah.
like you're
Yeah,
killing
you're
it.
getting polyphenols. Oh yeah, resistant starch. I mean, no lectins, none of
Yeah.
that. It's great.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That sounds so good. I'm gonna have to make it. But I have to find that sauerkraut. That's I've never heard of that.
Yeah. And the
Oh,
way that I bake the sweet potato was taught to me by a Korean friend of mine who learned that from
oh
her mom.
wow.
So like because it's also a Korean sweet potato, the Japanese sweet potato, but it's a really great way to bake them. If you want more low glycemic, you could boil the potato and then you could cool it off and then put it on your plate. And you could like
Awesome.
heat it up again if you wanted it warm. So
Yeah.
that's lower glycemic. When you bake it, it gets a little bit higher sugar, I'm sure you know. So,
Yes. So our podcast is called Farming for Health, and I'd love to hear what farming for health means to you.
oh, well, I mean, farming for health is farming for soil health, I would say,
Hmm.
not for profit necessarily. So, in other words, farming in ways that promote healthy soil and healthy food rather than worrying about the bottom line. And the irony is that when you do farm for health, your bottom line is actually better. That's the research that we're finding out at Rodale, is that our yields are higher, our crops are more drought resistant, and we can actually make a profit. So really it's about, but the farming for health is really about creating soil that's rich in microbiology, fungi, mycorrhizae, bacteria, nematodes. And when there's that kind of healthy living going on in the soil, you're going to get healthy food. And healthy food is going to lead to you being your healthiest self. And so rather than paying the healthcare industry, which is like making pharmaceuticals that are supposed to make us better, we could be paying farmers.
Yes.
To like make us better. So that's kind of what it means to me.
I love that. And that's what we talk about here too, is like one of my main goals is for the farmer to become part of the healthcare team. And I think it only makes sense. Nutrition is really fundamental to our health. And we know now that the soil biology is so much more important necessarily than all the chemistry that we end up putting on afterwards. So taking care of our soil microbes really lets them then care for the plant and then for the people.
100%. Yeah, and I'll be forever grateful to Jeff Katch from Rodale for saying in 2017, you got to come to the farm.
Yeah.
That really, I always ate organic produce, but I never knew the science behind it. And so it really boils down to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So any last words that you want to leave our audience with today?
Well, I really think that, and I said this before, but the connection of our gut's health and microbiome and that of the soil, I think that the more we can understand what it means to take care of our soil and how that connects to how we take care of our gut, meaning we don't put, things in the gut that are going to create permeability or into our systems. We minimize our exposure to chemicals and drugs and whatnot, antacids, things that are going to cause harm to our soil, right? And the more we make that connection between what's happening with farming and what's happening as we're the gatekeeper of our own nutrition, our own bodies, I think that somehow we're going to make the world a healthier place.
I love it.
The more we get that. So it's something I like to ponder.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I was actually working on a presentation today where, the statistics are like our gut variability or like diversity is about 10% that of the soil. And so, with modern kind of urban living and less exposure to healthy soil and, kind of healthy agriculture, we've lost a lot of biodiversity. And we know that biodiversity is so important for our gut health. And we know that our gut health influences not only our digestion, but brain health, cardiovascular health, immune health. I mean, really, the list goes on and on. And so I think you're spot on with that one.
Yeah, I love how exhaustive the topic is as well. Like there's just so much knowledge out there and so much about it too. And in the work that you do. And I just think it's so exciting. It's so groundbreaking. And the more we can all get educated about that and take care of each other, take care of each other's guts.
Yeah.
Like, let's do this.
Yes. And I think that is a huge theme, like starting to care for each other and reconnect after such a time of isolation and kind of feeling alone. And I think people still are really feeling alone. So coming together and finding that connection is so important.
Yeah, and even like the human interaction, I feel like
Mm.
we get to exchange each other's gut bugs. Like
Right.
not having that for so long, I felt really unhealthy.
I
So yeah,
know. And that's another statistic, actually, that your environment plays more of a role in the mix of your microbiome than actually your genetics. And so, really, those who you're around and your living conditions and, where you're going every day, that actually influences your microbiome way more than kind of what card you were dealt when you were born.
totally. I know.
Yeah.
I'm like, when can we get together again?
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm looking forward to this year. I hope they invite us all back.
I know, so we can exchange microbes.
Yeah, that's right. So
Love
I
it.
know our listeners are going to want to connect with you. Where can they find you online?
So you can find me. My name is a little hard to spell, but I'll spell it out. So my website is Amy, Amy Ippoliti, Ippoliti.com. And then if you are a yoga teacher listening, we have a school of yoga that trains teachers. It's more of a professional school, and that's Vesselify.com. So it's Vessel, like vessel, if ify.com. And I'm also on Instagram under my name. I'm on Facebook under those two names as well. And that's the best place to find me.
Wonderful. And our listeners may want to check out your book as well.
Oh, yes. I have a book called The Art and Business of Teaching Yoga. And you can also find my classes not only at Vesselify.com, but on Yoga International. So online, on demand yoga classes and meditations.
Oh, and I love Yoga International. So
Oh, yay. I'm glad you
good.
like Yoga International. Yay.
Good. All right. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today.
It's such a pleasure to talk with you, Amy.
Thank you for listening to Farming for Health. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Connect with Farmer Lee Jones and I on Instagram and Facebook.